Right now on Morning News Now, disturbing developments in a deadly mass shooting inside a New York City high-rise. 4 people, including a police officer, shot dead by a gunman who then turned the gun on himself. New this morning, officials familiar with the investigation telling NBC News that the gunman left a note at the scene.
Mr. Tamura has a documented mental health history. His motives are still under investigation.
No words can fill the void that has been left by this tragedy. Our hearts break for the families and friends of the victims.
We'll bring you the latest, including what we're learning about some of the victims. Also this morning, cruel summer. More than 100 million Americans waking up to another scorcher, with triple-digit heat set to shatter records in several cities. We are tracking the temperatures. Plus, deals and diplomacy for President Trump on his tour of the UK. The president meeting with Prime Minister Keir Starmer to talk trade and the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, while also putting the pressure on Russian President Vladimir Putin to end the war in Ukraine. Plus, President Trump speaking out about his past friendship with convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. We will have an update from Washington. And isolation. New research suggests artificial intelligence is improving productivity at the expense of the employee experience. A look at how using the technology at work could be impacting your mental health as it continues to impact more and more jobs.
Every industry imaginable. Good morning. Good to have you with us on a busy Tuesday. I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Slars. We're going to begin with the latest on the investigation into that deadly mass shooting. It was just blocks away here in New York City as officials reveal new details about the gunman.
Police say that man, armed with a military-style assault rifle, opened fire inside a high-rise in Midtown Manhattan last night, and that he killed an NYPD officer and 3 others. The shooter is also dead. Authorities say killing himself. He's been identified as 27-year-old Shane Tamura of Las Vegas. Witness video captured the chaotic moments when officers were seen carrying victims' bodies, including one of their own, out from the building. The NYPD commissioner described this timeline of the shooting.
The building's security camera footage shows the shooter enter the lobby, turn right, and immediately open fire on an NYPD officer. He then shoots a woman who took cover behind a pillar and proceeds through the lobby, spraying it with gunfire. He makes his way to the elevator bank, where he shoots a security guard who was taking cover behind the security desk. One additional male is shot in the lobby. The shooter then calls the elevator, which opens in the lobby. A female exits that elevator, and he allows her to walk past him unharmed. He goes up to the 33rd floor, which is route and management, and begins to walk the floor, firing rounds as he traveled.
One person was struck and killed on that floor. The gunman then made his way down a hallway where police say he shot himself in the chest. Let's get the latest on the investigation from NBC News national law enforcement and intelligence correspondent Tom Winter. Tom, good to have you with us. All right, so when we look at this building, we know it houses the headquarters of several large financial firms like Blackstone, also the National Football League. This morning, officials familiar with the investigation tell NBC News the suspect left a note inside of a car near the scene. What are we learning about this person and a possible motive?
Yeah, and apparently it was that car that he got out of, and then we saw, obviously, that surveillance video of him walking into the building. According to multiple people that have been briefed on the investigation, there's the note that's found inside of the car, and apparently a reference to the fact that maybe football injuries led to his mental health decline, and there's a specific reference to CTE, which is, of course, the brain condition that so many former athletes have suffered as a result of their time playing football or other sports, frankly, that can lead to a breakdown mentally. It's not clear at all if he has CTE. This is somebody who, you know, when we first Googled him last night, information comes up. He played high school football, and that's something that he had an interest in, that he was involved in. But it's not like somebody who played 20 years in the National Football League after a college career, et cetera. So that's something that they're definitely going to look at. There was nothing on his person that they found that could help with respect to motive. But I think this note appears to be quite clear and appears to be left behind for investigators to find.
That photo that we were just showing there that's taken from that surveillance footage of what looks like this very large assault rifle being carried into the building. What do we know about that? About what weapons are recovered at the scene? Do we know if they were obtained legally?
Yeah, so Police Commissioner Jessica Tisch says that was an M4 assault rifle. So it's the same type of assault rifle that we've seen on so many of these type of shootings. Carrying it there is obviously illegal to have in New York City. It's not something that we see out unless a police officer has one out. Certainly would never carry it that way. They also found apparently a revolver as well as additional ammunition and magazines were found inside the vehicle, the revolver inside the vehicle. As far as whether or not they're obtained legally, that's something that they're in the process of investigating right now. That is something in the past where we have seen if there are additional individuals charged and somebody sell them the gun that shouldn't have, particularly given his mental health history. But those laws can be tricky as well. So that'll all be part of the investigation. That's one of the reasons why we saw last night and heard on the radio transmissions the NYPD was calling for its heavily armed teams because they knew what they were dealing with and they knew that this was somebody who had a lot of firepower.
Let's talk about the victims. We mentioned an NYPD officer lost his life. Officer Didarul Islam worked out of Islam but was on detailed assignment in Midtown last night. What are we learning about this officer and the other victim?
Yeah, so out of the 4-7 precinct in the Bronx, and as we see, and frankly we see here at our own building, we have officers that are on paid details. Basically, that means that they are a member of the New York City Police Department. They show up in uniform, but the building or the company pays for that police presence. And at a building like this, with the type of companies, you referenced Blackstone, other major multinational companies, you've got the NFL that's there. All of these buildings have companies that people really know, are well known, and that a very small segment of the population might have some sort of an issue with or perceived issue with. And so that's the reason why you see that uniform presence. Also, that individual is going to be armed and has a potential opportunity to stop something like this. Obviously, when you have somebody come in and just start firing, it's very difficult for any officer. This is particularly difficult. This officer has 2 sons. His wife is pregnant with a 3rd child, an immigrant to the United States. And as the police commissioner said last night, doing, what everybody has asked him to do, he died a hero, as she said.
He's been with NYPD 3.5 years, no doubt. Everyone is paying tribute to him and his service.
Definitely.
Tom Winter, appreciate your reporting. Thank you so much.
Well, now we want to bring in Nikisha Lewis. She witnessed the chaos during the shooting from what's called the NFL Plaza. Thank you so much for speaking with us this morning. We are so glad you were not harmed during what must have been just this terrifying situation. I know you told some of our colleagues at NBC News yesterday that it felt like you were in a war zone. If you could just help people understand kind of where you were, this area. I understand you've hung out with your friends before pretty often, kind of what you do there, and then what you heard and saw when the shooting began.
So the plaza of the building provides public access to the community. So it's more of like a recreational area for folks who live and work in the area. I have 3 friends who just moved into the area, so I was having dinner there. That was an ideal spot for us to catch up. Within moments of us actually talking and eating, we heard rapid gunfire from inside the building. And I remember looking up. I had brief conversations with the officer prior to him going into the building. And I remember my field of vision was where he was standing before the gunshots. I could see him or see straight into the building as the gunshot started. One of the walls of the building, which is glass, was practically shattered, but not all the way. I couldn't see inside. So I knew immediately it was some type of gunfire. And my friends and I crouched as best as we could. We were on the perimeter walls of the property. There are seating areas along that area. We crouched toward the exit of the property. And as we were about to exit the property fully, we saw a worker run from the building, and he was running really hard. And I was like, wow, that's really great. He's trying to get away from the chaos. But as he reaches us, he finally says, help, help, I've been shot. And because of how strong he was running, I couldn't believe, so I turned around to look. He had what looked like a wound, I don't know if it was in the back.
And
to help him settle down.
What were you able to do to help that person in that moment? Because I think a lot of people, their instinct would have been to run, but I know you and your partner actually helped that person.
Basically, the wall is elevated on one side and is very low on the other. So we all just instinctively thought to just get everybody and ourselves behind the taller section of the wall, which is the street that you're seeing right now.
After that moment when you left the plaza, I know you spoke also with an officer. What was that conversation like?
It was before everything transpired. We had a little bit of a spat that I don't know if I want to address right now. But he subsequently went inside the building. Essentially, I felt like when we just got into the perimeter of, so where we decided to seat ourselves, he suddenly had positioned himself immediately next to us, which for guys on detail and security guards, that's what they do to certain groups of people, you know what I mean? And so I took issue with that. I was saying we're clearly not a present threat to the building while you standing over that over us. That's making me uncomfortable in addition to my user experience. And he was a very mild-mannered man. He didn't try to be all, like boisterous or anything. He just gently left us where we're sitting and went into the building to stand close to the revolving door, which I imagine that's where he encountered the gunman, because he would have been the first and at that point the only person on site with a weapon that could challenge him. So that's why he might have been shot first. But I do think back to whether if you were still next to us, if we would have been caught up in the crossfire. I do remember running across the street to the church as we were escaping the immediate vicinity of the incident. I just started crying. I don't know anybody personally, but the shock of the experience, not having been in a mass shooting incident before, it really. And one of the last people he spoke with, like moments before he was killed, I'm still just spirit in engaging with us. Really
Lakeisha Lewis, what an experience, and it's breaking up a little bit, so I'm sorry if I'm interrupting you, but what an experience it sounds like you had. We so appreciate your time this morning. We are so happy you are okay. Thank you for sharing those details with us.
In other news, a huge part of the country is feeling the heat again this morning. If you live on the East Coast, anywhere from New England all the way down to Florida, well, we don't have to tell you about the extreme temperatures and the humidity. Get this. More than 150 million people are starting the day under a heat alert. That's about how many people voted in last year's presidential election. The National Weather Service issued a heat advisory for here in New York through tomorrow. Temperatures expected to reach the upper 90s. It'll feel like triple digits when you factor in the humidity. The city opened cooling centers to help people escape the fifth heat emergency so far this summer. To the south, cities like Savannah, Miami, and Charleston have reached near record temperatures this week. Forecasters say relief may be on the way soon, with a cold front expected to move in tomorrow night. NBC News correspondent Emily Ikeda has more from Jersey City. Emily, good morning.
Hey there. Well, you know it's going to be a brutally hot day when my not-so-pocket-sized thermometer is showing 80 degrees even at this early hour, and we know it's only going to get worse. This area could feel like 105, marking northeastern New Jersey's third extreme heat warning so far this season, as officials from Jacksonville, Florida to New York City are urging people simply to stay inside with this heat dome hanging on and impacting more than 150 million people. It has cities across the region extending hours for things like splash pads behind me, pools. New York City, for instance, even transforming cultural hubs like museums into massive cooling centers as it experiences its fifth heat emergency of the season. Meantime, the upper Midwest is experiencing and cleaning up from a different weather woe. Detroit was drenched by several inches of rain. The airport there experiencing a temporary ground stop yesterday, and there was a possible tornado that touched down in South Dakota yesterday, tearing through homes and farms as well. Meantime, Dallas could see yet another day of a heat index feeling like 103. It has fire and rescue crews running back-to-back calls. In addition to the heat and concerns around heat-related illnesses, there are also concerns about air quality alerts stretching from Delaware to Massachusetts, impacting millions of people. Officials urging people to be mindful, especially in those more vulnerable populations. Think younger kids, older adults, people with heart and breathing conditions. A bit of a 1-2 punch for heading outside today. Back to you.
All right, Emily, thank you.
Now let's bring in NBC News meteorologist Angie Lastman.
She's tracking the temperatures for us this morning. So, Angie, this is the part where you just point at all these high numbers and list them off, right?
To sum it up, yes, guys, you're exactly right. It's going to be another scorcher of a day. You just heard Emily kind of laying out exactly what we have in store. And when you see it visually, we've got a whole lot of folks that are under these alerts, and for good reason this morning. 154 million people from Kansas City out to New York, down to Tampa, along the Gulf Coast, parts of the Midwest included in this. And some of these alerts are going to stay with us through tomorrow as well, through at least Wednesday. We'll finally start to see some relief beyond that. But between now and then, we've got a couple of really warm and extremely dangerous days when it comes to our temperatures and our humidity levels. Here's what we've got on store for today in New York City. 98 degrees, but will feel like 103 at the warmest point of the day. 112 for what it'll feel like in Nashville. 117 for Memphis's heat index later today. 109 in St. Louis. Detroit, not much better. You're going to hit 90 degrees and feel like 96. Tomorrow, a little bit of relief for our friends in parts of the upper Midwest, but not so much really Cincinnati and points south and out towards the coast and as far west as Dallas. 102 for your temperature tomorrow in Dallas, but you will feel like 104. We've got New York feeling like 100 degrees. And finally, as we get into the end of the work week, we'll see a big chunk of the country getting some relief, specifically the Northeast back toward the Great Lakes. It's 70s from Thursday through Saturday in Cleveland. We've got 70s returning to the forecast on Friday in New York City. It'll actually be a pretty great weekend for folks there. The farther south you go, though, places like Charlotte, Nashville, you're going to hold on to those 90s really through the end of the work week. But notice Little Rock, you go from 97 degrees on Thursday to 87 degrees by the time Saturday rolls around. So we've got a couple of days to get through before we get some relief. One thing to note, though, with all the sunshine, with the heat, we do have a difficulty when it comes to air quality. We've got some alerts up, and they're alerts that extend from Rehoboth Beach all the way up through Philadelphia, New York, and up into Newport. These are going to be in effect through the day today because we do have those unhealthy levels of air quality for sensitive groups. So if you are sensitive, making sure that you're staying indoors, everybody really finding a cool spot is going to be the best way to beat the heat today.
Another reason to stay inside today.
Yep.
Oh,
Thanks.
gosh, not looking forward to it. Thank you.
President Trump is wrapping up his trip to Scotland today. Earlier this morning, the president attended the grand opening of his new golf course in Aberdeen. And later this afternoon, he'll be flying back to Washington.
His return comes a day after he met with British Prime Minister Keir Starmer. The two men mainly discussed the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza, but the war in Ukraine was also on the agenda, with the president renewing his frustration at Russian President Vladimir Putin.
NBC News White House correspondent Vaughn Hilliard joins us now. So, Vaughn, one of the big headlines from yesterday's talks was the president saying he's going to shorten dramatically that 50-day deadline for Russia to end the war with Ukraine. Tell us more about that and what reasons he's giving.
We still don't know, Joe, exactly what the end result of Russia not agreeing to a ceasefire end of the war is when that deadline is reached. But the president had initially, you're right, set this 50-day deadline for Russia to effectively not only come to the negotiating table, but actually bring this war to a halt. And in the last 36 hours, 300 drones, according to the Ukrainians, were launched from Russia in the direction of Ukrainian cities. And that is where you hear this president shortening up the timeline before he says that he and the United States will take action. Take a listen.
There's no reason to wait. If you know what the answer is going to be, why wait? And it would be sanctions and maybe tariffs, secondary tariffs. I was very tough on Putin in one way, but we got along very well. And I never really thought this would happen. I thought we'd be able to negotiate something, and maybe that'll still happen. But it's very late down the process, so I'm disappointed.
Now, you heard him mention those secondary tariffs. Effectively, that would be tariffs that are placed on countries that import Russian goods, particularly oil and gas. So that could be additional tariffs on China and India, for example, effectively trying to force those countries to stop doing business with Russia. Of course, the economic repercussions would be massive. Up on Capitol Hill, there's actually already bipartisan legislation in the Senate to implement those sort of tariffs at a 500% level there. So far, the president has held off on giving the head nod to Congress to go forward with that piece of legislation, seemingly giving Vladimir Putin and the Russians at least a little bit more time to bring this war to an end, though at this point, 3 years on, Russia has shown little inclination to do so.
Von, trade was also a big part of this trip. We talked a lot yesterday about the trade deal with the European Union, and now we're getting more reaction from European leaders. Not all seem to be so happy with it. What are we hearing there?
That's right. This is European Union is a 27-nation member group, and what you're looking at is the EU, the head of it, sitting down over the weekend with the presidents of the United States, sharing the framework of this agreement. And there was great frustration among some members. Particularly, there is that 15% tariff that is now levied on goods, including French wine, for example. And I bring up the French for a specific reason. The French prime minister very specifically making the case, quote, "It is a dark day when an alliance of free peoples gathered to affirm their values and defend their interests resolves to submission," suggesting that the EU effectively caved to the demands of the United States. The head of the EU saying that this brings stability and predictability to their markets. There's 3.5 years of this Trump administration and the EU clearly trying to avoid any escalation in terms of the trade war between the United States and its members.
Yvonne, while we're talking trade, we saw the U.S. and China restart talks yesterday. Real quick, how did that go?
Right, and actually in just the last hours this morning here, day 2 of talks have begun between Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer meeting with Chinese delegation. Yesterday, those talks took place. There were no breakthroughs announced. There is the second day of talks. There is an August 12th deadline that the White House has set for China to come to a trade agreement with the United States before it places those sky-high tariffs back on China. You'll recall that earlier this summer, the two countries agreed to scale back those tariffs that had set up an effective embargo. There is still, economists and experts say, a long ways to go in terms of actually getting into concrete details of a potential trade agreement. So a lot of questions ahead here over the next 2 weeks. But in Stockholm, clearly some progress to some extent here between the U.S. and China.
All right, Von Hilliard. Von, thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Well, the domestic firestorm surrounding the files of convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein has also cast a shadow over the president's Scotland visit.
Yeah, after that meeting with Prime Minister Starmer, the president was asked several questions about those files, as well as his former relationship with Epstein. Take a listen to some of what he said.
If they had anything, I assume they would have released it. The whole thing is a hoax. I never had the privilege of going to his island. And I did turn it down, but a lot of people in Palm Beach were invited to his island. In one of my very good moments, I turned it down. I didn't want to go to his island.
NBC News legal affairs reporter Gary Grumback joins us now on this. Gary, good morning. So we heard the president there, essentially dismiss these files as a hoax. And we also heard him question why the previous Biden administration never released them either. So let's address that. What do we know about why Democrats at the time didn't release these files?
So conspiracy has been swirling around this for years, ever since Jeffrey Epstein died by suicide in his jail cell in 2019. And so many of these documents have actually been released between 2008 and 2019 during some of these criminal proceedings of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. But Democrats have been trying for years and years to release anything that does, in fact, remain that could be interesting to the public interest. You'll remember the late Elijah Cummings, the head of the House Oversight at the time, tried to hold a hearing about this in 2019. But so many of these documents that still remain are secret. They were involved in grand jury proceedings, and by law, by federal law, that information can only be released publicly by a judge, and that's exactly what we see happening in courts in New York these days.
You mentioned Ghislaine Maxwell, that is Epstein's former accomplice. We now see that her attorney renewing his request for the Supreme Court to overturn her conviction. Tell us what her lawyer's arguing here.
So Maxwell's attorneys here are arguing that she should not have been prosecuted in New York because they say she had a non-prosecution agreement in Florida. However, it's unclear if she actually ever signed that agreement in Florida and if she was ever a party to that agreement. It seems to be that her name is not at all involved in that agreement. So there could be a case where here the Supreme Court just simply throws this away and doesn't do anything about it. But it'll be months and months before we hear anything from the Supreme Court on this issue.
What about the Justice Department? What's the latest on where they stand?
Well, that's where this all started, right? At the beginning of July, they came out with a letter saying Jeffrey Epstein died by suicide, trying to put away any of those conspiracy theories about how exactly he could have died, and also saying they weren't going to release any more files. That had President Trump's MAGA base incredibly fired up because they were looking for some incriminating evidence about high-profile Democrats that they may never get. Guys?
All right, Gary, thank you so much.
At least 2 children are dead after a boat crash off the coast of Miami Beach yesterday. Several others were injured. Surveillance footage exclusively obtained by NBC News shows the moment authorities say a barge struck a sailboat which was carrying kids and a counselor from a nearby sailing camp. NBC News correspondent Jesse Kirsch has more from the scene.
This is the moment a picturesque day at a children's sailing camp turned to tragedy in South Florida.
Part of a submerged sailboat with missing children.
Authorities say a barge struck a sailboat carrying 5 children and an adult in Miami's Biscayne Bay.
We do have Miami Beach Fire Marine around as well. They're responding with fireboats.
Surveillance footage obtained exclusively by NBC News shows the barge toppling the much smaller vessel. The U.S. Coast Guard says all 6 people were recovered, but a 7-year-old girl and a 13-year-old girl both died.
I've never seen so many ambulances, dive rescue. I couldn't even barely walk. It was so crowded.
The horrific crash sparking a massive response. Divers and police boats swarming. The barge carrying a crane sitting in the water for hours. The Miami Yacht Club telling NBC News the sailboat was from its Youth Sailing Foundation summer camp, a program for children ages 7 to 15. The club writing it's devastated by this terrible tragedy. Meanwhile, authorities are investigating how this could have happened.
Our thanks to Jesse Kirsch for that report. The sailboat was submerged under the barge for hours after the incident before first responders were able to recover it. 2 more victims, an 8-year-old girl and an 11-year-old girl, remain in the hospital at last check in critical condition. Much more to come here on Morning News Now. Later this hour, counterfeit crackdown, how luxury retailers are fighting back against those so-called super fakes with a little fashion forensics.
Up first, though, after the break, Overseas Emergency will have the latest on a series of wildfires burning in popular tourist destinations across Europe. Stay with us.
Welcome back. In a rare break with Israel, President Trump is pledging to take action on the hunger crisis in Gaza. Meeting with British Prime Minister Keir Starmer in Scotland yesterday, President Trump said the U.S. would set up food centers in the enclave and dismissed Prime Minister Netanyahu's denials of starvation.
We can save a lot of people. I mean, some of those kids that's real starvation stuff. I see it. And you can't fake that.
His comments come amid mounting global outrage over the rising death toll from starvation and malnutrition in Gaza. Aid flowed into the enclave on Monday with dozens of airdrops conducted by Israel, Jordan, and the UAE. But aid groups are warning it's not enough. The IPC, that's the world's leading authority on hunger, said this morning that famine is unfolding across the enclave.
NBC News international correspondent Matt Bradley joins us now from Tel Aviv with more on this. Matt, good morning. So can you start by telling us more about the new aid that is entering Gaza? We heard there it's certainly not enough, but is it making any difference on the ground?
Well, I mean, we're seeing people picking it up. We're seeing people walking away with it. There is quite a bit of aid that's going in, but, we're talking about a population of about 2.2 million people who have been starved, many of them nearly to death, some of them to death. And when we're talking about children who are receiving this aid, in many cases, we're talking about malnutrition that will be very difficult to reverse without more advanced medical care and intervention. So we're not unlikely to see an immediate effect from this opening of aid, and it's unclear what the Israelis' intentions are from here on out, whether they're going to open the spigot even more and let more aid in, or whether they're just going to be satisfied with this and close it almost entirely as they have done in the past. So, again, we're hearing all of this international criticism. This is clearly meant by the Israelis to try to meet some of that anger that is just rising up throughout the world from these images that we're seeing. This food aid that's coming in, it is reaching people, and people do seem as though they are able to get it. But you're seeing these images, people clamoring to get to some of these aid drop sites.
Matt, those comments from President Trump, they really mark kind of a rare break with Prime Minister Netanyahu. Up until this point, Mr. Trump seemed reluctant to really use U.S. power to bring aid into Gaza. But something seems to have changed here. What do we think that is? And do we know anything about plans to actually set up food centers, as was mentioned there?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, Savannah. It was only a couple of weeks ago when President Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu looked as though they were just best buds. President Trump had taken a sincerely big political risk when he decided to intervene on Israel's behalf to strike Iran. And, you know, obviously Benjamin Netanyahu was excessively grateful to that. And they celebrated on Benjamin Netanyahu's third trip to Washington since the president had taken power. Now, really, the president has kind of hit Netanyahu right where he lives in saying that there is famine in the Gaza Strip. Now, you asked what changed. I really don't know. But we can take the president's word for it, that he just simply, like the rest of us, saw those images on TV and decided this is something, as he said, that you can't fake.
Matt, Israel is not only facing foreign pressure over the aid situation in Gaza. Now, for the first time, we have two rights groups from within Israel saying their country is committing genocide in the enclave. Tell us more. How prominent are these groups, and how is the Israeli government responding to that?
Yeah, I mean, these are some of the most well-known, most respected groups in the Israeli human rights sort of environment here. B'Tselem and Physicians for Human Rights. Now, we know that there are tons of other human rights groups here in Israel, but these, as you mentioned, are the first two. Now, one of the things that was really central to the argument they made in front of the whole world yesterday in a press conference was the question of intent. Genocide has a somewhat clear definition in international law. It's the destruction of a population in whole or in part. And what justices, what people who would adjudicate this kind of thing to make that designation of genocide, which comes with legal obligations to the world, to make that designation requires an expression of intent. So one of the things that they did in their presentation was to show a long sort of list of all of the comments from high-level Israeli politicians who made dehumanizing remarks or basically implied that they wanted to destroy the population of the Gaza Strip. That is what convinced these two groups.
Matt Bradley reporting from Tel Aviv. Matt, thank you.
Let's stay with overseas news now. Dramatic scenes are unfolding along the Mediterranean as wildfires force tourists and locals to evacuate from the Italian island of Sardinia to the Greek Isles. NBC News Chief International Correspondent Keir Simmons has more on the extreme conditions fueling these fires.
Fleeing thick smoke and flames, beachgoers in Italy abandoned sunbeds and escaped on Sunday. More than 100 on the world-famous Italian island of Sardinia had to be rescued from the sea, forced there by the fast-moving fire. This woman found on a rock her beach bag beside her. Across the Mediterranean, fires are engulfing communities. This was another tourist island, Kythera in Greece, Saturday. This month, satellite images showed thick smoke from a fire streaming across the Greek islands. In a northern suburb of the capital, Athens, volunteers helped firefighters with hose pipes, while others escaped from a balcony. Houses are burning, this local says. They're burning here, they're burning over there. This weekend alone, 500 Greek firefighters faced 50 wildfires, 5 of them major conflagrations. One cause, intense summer heat, similar to this week's soaring US temps. Parts of Greece close to 111 degrees, even closing the Acropolis at one stage.
You need to have a hat, drink your water. The Red Cross is really great for giving us water here, but it is getting very hot now.
In neighboring Turkey, one site recorded a record temperature of 122 degrees. There, another fire was bearing down on the country's 4th largest city. More than 3,500 people have been evacuated, 4 deaths reported so far. 2 years ago, NBC News traveled across Greece to Evros, close to the Turkish border, to see the impact of what had been Europe's largest wildfire.
It started from these mountains there.
To find a charred landscape and locals who blamed a combination of climate change and lost forest management skills. Now Southern Europe faces another difficult summer. Keir Simmons, NBC News.
Well, coming up, staying sharp one step at a time, the new research that shows how movement can help fight off dementia.
Also, the doggone best, how your canine companion could be the key to managing stress. So don't pause your devices. Your weekly check-in is next here on Morning News Now.
We are back with our weekly mental health check-in. This week, we're diving into how advances in technology at work are changing not just how we do our jobs, but how we feel when we're doing them.
Plus, a look at the toll a person's political views can have on their emotional well-being.
Joining us now for more is psychotherapist Dr. Robbie Ludwig. Dr. Ludwig, always great to see you. Good morning. Thanks so much for being with us. So we're going to start on this ever-changing workplace. And this, of course, maybe not a surprise, has to do with AI. A new report from the American Psychological Association, it's highlighting how rapid technological change is reshaping the psychological experience of U.S. workers. We've got this new survey. It finds that 84% of employees who are encouraged to use AI report feeling lonely on the job. Tell us more about what this study found, and could advances in tech be really driving this, making the workplace feel more isolating?
Absolutely. I think what we're seeing is that AI for all of us is making us very efficient. It can help us handle issues that much faster, but it's also creating a disconnect and a divide. So in the old days, we might go to a supervisor to ask a question. We're not doing that now. So it's increasing this sense of loneliness and disconnection, which is getting us to feel more stressed out. And, you know, really these interactions that we have at work, we're missing the, talking in the hallway, getting coffee together. And so really the workplace is trying to counterbalance how do we handle these hybrid work situations when we're trying to please people's emotional well-being. And it's through team building and counterbalancing the things that we're missing in this new way of work life.
Well, let's talk about another kind of disconnection, and it's because of political polarization. We're seeing more and more how people's political views affect their lives, whether they're ending friendships or it's harming their family relationships. I mean, what are we learning about the kind of toll these divisions are just taking on our mental health?
You know, at a time where we know there's increased loneliness, this political divide is really interfering with our social connections. So people who might have been really good friends at one point are breaking up friendships because of political disagreements. This is happening even in certain families, that they don't get together as frequently or often because they want to avoid these conversations. And also it's just increasing our sense of stress levels. So we really need to address that as well.
Also, favorite one of the day, maybe another reason dog is man's best friend. This is sweet. A study suggests that dogs might be more than just these loyal companions. They could be key to actually managing stress, because researchers found that our furry friends, they can have this more complex biological effect on us than we once thought. Tell us how they can help regulate stress.
So they are, they do affect us biologically. We have increase of that love hormone that we experience. It also helps us decrease our stress levels and our cortisol. And so all of these factors happening at once, in addition to love, it's helping us with our physical ailments, cancer, dementia, heart disease, autoimmune issues. So they're not only good for our psyche, they're good for our physical well-being too.
Dr. Robbie Ludwig, really good news there. Thank you so much. Great to see you.
Thank you.
New research is shining a light on how healthy choices can boost brain power as we age. This is a major clinical trial in the U.S., along with 2 international studies revealing that some simple lifestyle changes may help protect against cognitive decline. Get this, and I didn't know this. Right now in the U.S., nearly 10% of people over the age of 65 have been diagnosed with dementia.
CDC data shows that number could double by 2060. Well, this new research, which was published just yesterday, it suggests that regular movement and a nutritious diet, those easy but sometimes tough things, may reduce the risk of memory loss and other symptoms associated with dementia.
Let's bring in NBC News medical contributor Dr. Kavita Patel to talk more about this. Dr. Patel, good morning. So we got this clinical trial called U.S. Pointer. It was the first large-scale randomized controlled trial to show a direct link between lifestyle changes and better brain health. What did the results tell us?
Yeah, Joe, Savannah, this is a big deal. And as you mentioned, one of 3 studies that was profiled internationally. So this was a trial of several thousand adults aged 60 to 79. It was meant to be a representative sample of people in the United States across race, ethnicity, sex, demographics, of people who are at higher risk for dementia. About a third of them actually carried a genetic risk for developing dementia, but they were all of normal cognitive function. They split the groups into half who got really structured coaching and kind of like what I would call accountability for a number of lifestyle interventions, including exercise and diet, and the other half that had the same type of coaching, but at a self-paced, meaning choose your own adventure, do it on your own, be accountable to yourself. And what they showed was that it was incredible. They showed that in all groups, both groups, whether you got the coaching formally or did it on your own, actually had an improvement in their cognitive function. This is across both men and women. And interestingly enough, the more that they did it, the more activity that they engaged in, the higher the return. So this just illustrates that these lifestyle interventions might be just as great of prevention as anything else we could do in a pill or in a package.
And then there were also the other ones that you mentioned here, 2 new studies. This was presented at the Alzheimer's Association International Conference just yesterday. Let's talk about the first one here. It discovered that walking, that's pretty easy, had a significant impact on people with a certain genetic predisposition to develop dementia. Take us through those findings and also tell us how you even know if you have this genetic predisposition.
Yeah, so let's tackle that first, Savannah. So the genetic predisposition, you can get it measured through a doctor's order clinically in a lab. There are also some home testing kits that can have some variability, so just double check. I would say talk to your health professional. And this is something that I suggest everybody does because as you mentioned in Joe's numbers, about 10% of us, but even more as we age, will develop kind of signs of dementia. Not all of that is Alzheimer's, to be clear. These studies showed, specifically the walking one, they followed adults who just self-reported over 10 years. Again, people who were at higher predisposition, but they also compared it to people who had none of these genetic markers and didn't necessarily have any family risk, but just did more movement. Both groups across all ages showed an improvement in their cognition and a slowing down of cognitive decline. Our cognition also declines as we age, but it slowed down with just simple walking, not high intensity movement, but just walking, even in those with high genetic risk.
So real quick, Dr. Patel, for people living with loved ones who are getting older, is there a certain time to focus on these lifestyle changes?
Yeah, so this is the thing. These do not kind of substitute for treatment. So you want to keep in mind that this is really about prevention. And we always like to say that it's never too early to think about prevention. So I would suggest anybody listening, any age you are, regardless of your known risk, I would say that this is just another sign that doing these things can actually add up. We've talked here about all the benefits to cardiovascular health and other things. This is just one more data point about how it can help your brain health.
You just make those changes and all sorts of good things will happen. All right, Dr. Patel, as always, good to have you on.
Easy.
Thank you so much. Coming up, dupe process, a new generation of counterfeit items challenging some of the world's biggest designer brands.
I'm going to make a guess. I think this is the fake. It is?
Good job. You're hired.
I'm hired.
When we come back, how luxury retailers are turning to technology to crack down on the copycats. Morning News Now, we'll be right back. Welcome back. There is a new counterfeit trend that's fooling even the savviest of shoppers. It's called a super fake. It's a knockoff designer handbag that is so convincing. Luxury resellers are fighting back with fashion forensics. NBC News correspondent Emily Ikeda shows us the high-tech tools they're using to spot what's real and what's a replica.
Hermes, Bottega Veneta, Louis Vuitton. Luxury brands have been around for decades. And so have the cheap, plasticky copycats sold for a fraction of the price.
It is the Bottega Hop. Is this fake?
But a new generation of dupes, far more convincing, is emerging.
I felt this leather before on this exact model, and it does not feel like this.
Fashion influencer Jonathan Guo says he was stunned by just how realistic this knockoff he purchased for more than $1,000 secondhand was. Fortunately, he did get a full refund.
It definitely is just like one among thousands of unfortunate instances, and it's only thanks to like all the prior experience that I had that I was even able to detect that there might be something wrong.
These so-called super fakes have brands and businesses scrambling to ramp up authentication standards.
I would say those really started to emerge around COVID, actually.
Luxury reseller The Real Real pulled 7,000 counterfeit handbags off the market last year alone.
Is authentication more important than ever?
Authentication is absolutely more important than ever. Counterfeits used to be very obvious. They would have misspellings. The logos would be off. Today, on the outside, to sort of the untrained human eye, these items look really, really good.
So just how good? I put my own skills to the test alongside The Real Real's Hunter Thompson.
I'm gonna feel it. Okay, feels nice.
Looking over, touching, even smelling these two apparent Hermes Constance bags.
I'm going to make a guess. I think this is the fake. It is?
Good job. You're hired.
I'm hired. The reason why is I feel like there is a slight difference in feeling.
Absolutely.
The look is absolutely the same, but there's a slight difference in how it feels.
Subtle differences made much more evident with the help of The Real Real's newest edition.
Our very state-of-the-art X-ray machine.
As technology takes on a larger role in backing up even the trained eye. Thompson noting the differences in the hardware and springs.
When we look at the real deal here, you're going to see a difference in this spring.
His team now also uses cameras to microscopically look at the surface of an item.
When that camera sees an anomaly, it's comparing it to all of this past data that we've collected, and it's able to say, hey, something's up here. Let's take a deeper look.
How about the Hermes Birkin bag? Can you pinpoint which is fake? The Real Real looks for a funny smell, too perfect of stitching, cheaper metals, feet screwed on rather than hammered into the bag as red flags. This one is worth nearly $25,000.
The speed at which counterfeits are produced has really enhanced over the last couple of years. We see items within the same season. We could see a counterfeit, honestly, before we see the real item in some cases.
And while many like Guo have mistakenly purchased a knockoff, one survey shows more than half of consumers worldwide have intentionally purchased a counterfeit. As experts say, the attitude around these super fakes has shifted amid an uncertain economy and fans fed up by sky-high prices. Social media flooded with shoppers comparing dupes with the actual item.
I never need to really be that rich because this is good enough.
But Thompson says any suggestion super fakes offer the same quality is misleading.
It's illegal to sell counterfeit goods. It's not illegal to buy a counterfeit good. So what would your word of caution be to shoppers?
Think about what this might be fueling. Think about labor. It may look great on the outside for a couple of months, but a lot of the construction we see, especially like under X-ray, it's going to fall apart. It's just not worth it at the end of the day.
Emily Ikeda, NBC News.
Let's stay on your wallet with the latest on Wall Street. China had been the top exporter of smartphones to the U.S. for decades.
Now there's reportedly a new king on the manufacturing throne. CNBC's Silvana Henao joins us with that and more for your Money Minute. Hey, Silvana, good morning.
Hey, Savannah. Hey, Joe. Good morning to you. Yeah, well, India is now the biggest maker and shipper of smartphones to the U.S., surpassing China. That's according to research firm Canalys. Now, phones built in India accounting for 44% of imports in the second quarter. That's up from just 13% a year ago. Now, the share of Chinese-made smartphones falling to 25% from more than 60% a year ago. This data coming as Apple is closing a retail store in China for the first time ever, although it still has more than 50 stores on the mainland. Waymo will roll out its robo-taxi service in Dallas next year, expanding its service as Tesla pushes to grow its recently launched business. Waymo will operate in Dallas through a new partnership with car rental company Avis Budget. Now, Waymo currently serves more than 250,000 paid trips a week in cities such as Phoenix, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and Austin, where it operates exclusively on Uber's platform. And Chili's is teaming up with Tecovas, that's a Texas-based retailer of cowboy boots and Western wear, to release Booth boots. So the deep red boots are being marketed as made from the same material as the boots in Chili's restaurants, red vinyl. Now, they're available in men's and women's starting today on the Tecovas website for $345. And the chains are also offering a Booth belt, which is handcrafted belt embellished with a chili pepper and a brass buckle for $75, guys.
Can't say I ever looked at a booth and said, ooh, I want to wear that. But
Right? I want to wear that booth. Totally agree with that. Thanks, Silvana.
That is going to do it for this hour of Morning News Now.
Stay with us, though. The news continues right now. Good morning. Thank you so much for being with us. I'm Savannah Sellers.
I'm Joe Fryer. Right now on Morning News Now, Midtown horror. A man goes on a shooting spree inside a Manhattan office building, killing 4 people, including a police officer, before shooting himself. We're learning new details this morning about the gunman and the apparent note that he left behind. Summer scorcher. Millions of people across the country set to feel the heat again today. Temperatures will be in the 90s in many places, and it will feel even hotter. Meteorologist Angie Lassman will have your sweltering forecast in just a few minutes. President Trump revealing to reporters he was invited to convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein's private island, but declined the invitation. This comes as Ghislaine Maxwell's attorney calls on the Supreme Court to overturn her 2021 conviction for recruiting and grooming underage girls for Epstein. Meanwhile, the president and British Prime Minister Keir Starmer meeting in Scotland to discuss trade and the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. We will bring you the latest. And opening up, Colorado football coach Deion Sanders speaking out about his battle earlier this year with bladder cancer. We'll tell you what the NFL Hall of Famer is saying about his diagnosis and Coach Prime's message to his fans. Something you've been following closely?
That's exactly right. The community's thinking about him.
All right, let's begin this hour with new details in the search for a motive behind that deadly New York City mass shooting. Happened just last night, just a couple blocks away from our studios here in Midtown.
That's right. A note left near the scene is offering potential new clues this morning about the shooter's state of mind as he opened fire inside of a Midtown skyscraper, which houses the headquarters of the National Football League. That rampage left 5 people dead, including an off-duty NYPD officer on security, 3 others, and the shooter, who police say turned the gun on himself. NBC News correspondent Erin McLaughlin has the latest on the investigation.
Hey there, it was the end of a typical workday just after 6:30 p.m. when police say the suspect armed with an assault rifle walked into that building behind me and opened fire.
Active shooter in the Midtown North at Park Avenue.
This morning, new details on the terrifying shooting in Midtown Manhattan.
Please stay inside, shelter in place.
After a gunman opened fire in a Park Avenue skyscraper Monday evening, killing 4 people, including a New York City police officer who was working as security in the building.
Male is wearing a black suit and a bulletproof vest.
The suspect, identified by law enforcement as 27-year-old Shane Tamura of Las Vegas, captured in this photo armed with an M4 assault rifle. The NYPD says Tamura, a former high school football player with a history of mental illness, drove cross-country days earlier. And NBC News learning Tamura left a note found at the scene. According to officials familiar with the investigation, he expressed anger that his mental illness may be linked to playing football. 2 officials saying he mentioned CTE, a brain disease linked to head trauma, as a possible cause of his condition. Investigators are looking into whether that's behind his targeting of the building, which is home to NFL headquarters. It also houses investment giant Blackstone and the accounting firm KPMG. NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell saying an NFL employee was seriously injured in the attack. Police finding a loaded revolver, rifle case, and more ammunition in the suspect's vehicle, and describing the chilling scene.
The building's security camera footage shows the shooter enter the lobby, turn right, and immediately open fire on an NYPD officer. He then shoots a woman who took cover behind a pillar and proceeds through the lobby, spraying it with gunfire.
Police say another security guard was killed before Tamura headed to the 33rd floor, where he started firing again.
1 person was struck and killed on that floor. He then proceeds down a hallway and shoots himself in the chest.
Approximately 100 people hiding.
Terrified employees barricading entrances with furniture. You heard there was an active shooter inside the building. How did you find out?
They mentioned it via email. We started looking around, then we started to find a place to hide. Pretty scary.
Overnight, a dignified transfer to honor one of the lives lost, 36-year-old NYPD officer Didarul Islam. The young father's pregnant wife is expecting their 3rd child.
He's a true blue New Yorker, not only in a uniform he wore,
but in his spirit and energy of loving this city.
That investigation is still ongoing. Our crew was here earlier this morning watching as investigators carried out a large number of brown bags from the building. Those bags usually used to carry evidence. They were loaded into a crime scene truck and taken away. We also understand from officials that they have recovered a cell phone at the scene. They're working to unlock it. Police were also seen outside of what was believed to be the suspect's home in Las Vegas. Back to you.
All right, Aaron, thank you.
For more, let's bring in former FBI Supervisor Rob D'Amico. Rob, good morning. So we're starting to hear about these potential leads police are working, like that note left behind by the suspect. What pieces of evidence do you think law enforcement officials are looking at right now as they do try and search for more answers about a motive?
Well, obviously the note, but the phone's going to be important. So getting the phone unlocked and being able to take out all the contents of the phone, emails, texts, encrypted messaging is going to be very important too, probably, to see really what was behind it. But I think he's given a clue with the CTE. I started to suspect that yesterday. I saw the interview with him from a high school football game. The NFL was there. Again, you're looking at why this target, why did he drive cross country very intentionally to go to one building? Something had to be in that building. And then when I heard that he shot himself in the chest was my last clue saying, I think it's going to be something related to CTE. Junior Seau was one of those NFL players that, again, committed suicide and shot himself in the chest so that his brain could be studied for CTE. And there's been other NFL players that have done that. So those are the things that led me to suspect that that may be the target. And he just didn't get to that floor. He ended up on the 33rd floor, unfortunately for those people, and he killed one person up there.
From an investigative standpoint, how can you work to sort of definitively make that connection?
Everything is going to go back to the interviews, discussing family members and friends and the state of mind, looking what he posted, he wrote on email and all that. Had he communicated with anyone in the NFL about this, what goes back? So it's just going to be an investigation where they're going to have to do, again, typical detective work, talking to witnesses that knew him, that were around him, try to find out even where he stayed in this trip here. I think they've logged spots that he drove through. Did he say anything to anyone there? But again, it was that very intentional target of driving right to that building and then going right in the building. He probably fantasized about this for a while. Again, so he may have talked to folks about it.
And ultimately answering the question as to whether it was CTE will actually take examining, of course, his brain. So we'll have to see if that's what happens there. What do you make of the fact that even with an off-duty, an on-detail police officer guarding the building, this suspect, who as far as we know had no military training, still managed to carry on with this rampage and even get all the way up to the 33rd floor?
It's one of those that I understand how actually easy it is. An intended person, a very motivated, intended person with an assault rifle can do a lot. The police officer probably didn't even have a chance because, again, he walked through the door. He knew he would see security. He knew he was going to take action. And action always beats reaction every time. If someone comes in and they know what they're going to do, as opposed to a police officer who has to watch hundreds of people come in the building, is not suspecting that, and then has to react to him drawing a long gun on him. But some of the things that I don't understand is normally buildings like this, you have to have a badge to get to certain floors. It's like an elevator when you have to have the badge to get in a room in a hotel, a certain floor. It's the same thing in these buildings. Also, didn't they have an emergency stop on the elevator? So as he went up to the 33rd floor, when he got in the elevator, they could do an emergency stop and at least trap him in that elevator. So I think some of the things are lacking. But again, I think incidents like this change security and how you look at it. When you look at Blackstone, what they were doing with the furniture, there's other things that you can do. I do assessments all the time on large corporations and high net worth individuals. You can buy ballistic glass. You can buy man traps that can trap a person in there if they don't have the right credentials. And these companies don't have it. And I think that's going to probably change because, again, when you see what's happening nowadays with violence.
All right. Rob D'Amico, appreciate your expertise. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Well, more than 150 million people nationwide are under a heat alert this morning, with temperatures feeling like triple digits from the East Coast to the Midwest. Here in New York, the National Weather Service issued a heat advisory through tomorrow when a colder front is expected to move in, bringing some much-needed relief. NBC News correspondent Emily Aketa is in Jersey City with the latest. Hey, Emily, good morning.
Hey, good morning to you. You might be able to make out some of the people behind me trying to get their steps in at this early hour. You know it's going to be a brutally hot day when my not-so-pocket-sized thermometer is showing we are already at above 80 degrees. It could feel like 105 today, marking the third extreme heat warning for northeastern New Jersey so far this season, as officials from Jacksonville, Florida to New York City are urging people to just simply stay inside. This morning, a dangerous heat dome is producing stifling temperatures nationwide, with over 150 million people under heat alerts.
This is very, very hot. I'm ready to go home and jump in any pool.
Scorching temps stretching from the middle of the country to the East Coast, with record highs expected in the north and southeast. It's already been feeling like triple digits in many areas, prompting cities to extend hours at pools and splash pads.
Oh, it is super hot, but in this water, it feels good.
New York City transforming iconic cultural hubs into massive cooling centers to help people escape its fifth heat emergency this summer.
Our entire museum is open as a cooling center.
Meanwhile, the Midwest is cleaning up from a different weather woe. Drenching rains in Detroit, turning roads into rivers and trapping some people in cars.
Some of our fire personnel had to go in and get a few people out of the car, and one of our firefighters actually got an infant out, too, that was still in the car seat.
Powerful winds and flooding also causing a temporary ground stop at the airport in Detroit. And up to 90-mile-an-hour winds nailing the northern plains, with at least one possible tornado in South Dakota, touching down near the town of Gregory and ripping through homes and farms. This morning, Dallas bracing for another day of the heat index topping 103, forcing fire and rescue crews to run back-to-back calls for heat-related illnesses.
It is absolutely critical to cool them as quickly as possible.
And while that heat-related illness is a major concern for most of the country today, officials are also urging people to be mindful of air quality alerts stretching from Delaware to Rhode Island because of this hot, sticky weather and air pollutants. It's of particular concern to those more vulnerable populations. Think younger children, older adults, people with heart or breathing conditions, as stepping outside is serving a 1-2 punch, guys.
Oof. All right, Emily, thank you so much.
And as you heard, the sizzling summer heat continues today.
Yeah, let's check out just how long it's going to stick around. Andrew Lassman's here in studio. Hey, Andrew, good morning.
Hi, guys. Good morning to you. Unfortunately, we've got a couple of days of this for a whole lot of folks. So many so that we've got plenty of alerts stretching essentially from the plains all the way to the East Coast, as far south as Florida, as far north as places like Michigan, and up through the Northeast. We've got 154 million people under these alerts, where temperatures in some spots, especially where you see that brighter pink, the heat warning, could reach heat index values over 110, so close to 115 in some spots. Here's the deal for today: a 103 for what it'll feel like in New York. We've got high 90s for the actual temperature in D.C., but over 100 for what it'll feel like. And that's kind of the story if you look to St. Louis, Cincinnati, Nashville, Memphis. All of those locations are going to feel much warmer than 100 degrees during the warmest part of the day today. Tomorrow, not much improvement, maybe a little improvement for parts of the upper Midwest, but really Cincinnati, Paducah, Little Rock, all those locations are going to see temperatures into the 90s and feel much warmer than that. New York City tomorrow, 100 degrees for your heat index. And as we look to Jacksonville, it'll feel like 108. We finally start to get a little bit of a break from this heat as we round out our work week. So in some locations like Chicago, that happens for Thursday. Mid 70s, upper 70s as you roll into the weekend. Not bad. Much better than what we're dealing with over the next couple of days. And then as you look to Charleston, we're still into the 80s on Thursday. Similar story for Nashville. But by the time we get to Friday and into Saturday, things really start to improve. We'll see New York City top out at just 83 degrees by Thursday, and upper 70s it is as we finish out our work week. You heard Emily mention those air quality issues. Here's the location. So Newport to Rehoboth Beach included Atlantic City, Philadelphia, New York, and this is ozone levels. So when you get the hot temperatures and you get the sunny conditions, we see this kind of poor air quality that gets trapped at the surface. So unhealthy for sensitive groups. That's something to remember today. Potentially, I wouldn't be surprised if we see see that lasting into tomorrow as well. Meanwhile, we've got some thunderstorms that we're going to track this afternoon and this evening. And as we get into tomorrow, those kind of ramp up right along that front that we're looking at. And we'll see some strong storms from Missouri to Maine. And then we'll potentially be looking at some flood concerns as well. But today, here's that severe threat. Billings, Hastings, Omaha, all included in that. We've got wind gusts and hail on the table. But the good news is our tornado risk is low.
That's good. You get heat or you get storms.
Exactly.
One or the other. Thanks, Angie.
You got it.
Well, heading overseas to Scotland now, where President Trump is wrapping up his vacation abroad. That visit, though, included a meeting with British Prime Minister Keir Starmer. But then the domestic firestorm surrounding the files of convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein caught up with the president following that meeting yesterday. NBC's Kelly O'Donnell is traveling with the president. She has more from Scotland. Hey, Kelly, good morning.
Good morning. Good to see you. The president offered new details here about what went wrong with his long-ago friendship with the late Jeffrey Epstein. He also insisted his political adversaries had control of the Epstein files. And all of this while next to the British Prime Minister on a trip that has today further blurred the lines of official government business for a sitting U.S. president and Mr. Trump as the head of his family business. The president mixing the political and the personal on his trip, touting his diplomatic meetings at a visit to one of his family-owned Scotland golf courses.
We put out fires all over the world. We stopped about 5 wars, so that's much more important than playing golf, as much as I like it.
Far from home, but trailed by a controversy, as the tangled drama around the infamous sex offender Jeffrey Epstein followed the president to Scotland, telling reporters he had been invited to Epstein's private island.
I never had the privilege of going to his island, and I did turn it down, but a lot of people in Palm Beach were invited to his island.
Mr. Trump provided a new description of what happened to end his friendship with Epstein years ago, a dispute over employees.
Stole people that work for me. I said, don't ever do that again. He did it again, and I threw him out of the place. Persona non grata.
The president has not ruled out granting clemency to Epstein's convicted co-conspirator, Ghislaine Maxwell.
Well, I'm allowed to give her a pardon, but nobody's approached me with it.
Maxwell provided 2 days of testimony last week to the Department of Justice. Officials say she answered questions under limited immunity against further prosecution. The president again rejected that he was told his name appeared in the Epstein files among many prominent figures.
If they had anything, I assume they would have released it. The whole thing is a hoax.
Influential voices, including Joe Rogan, demand more transparency.
This is a line in the sand. Yeah. This one's a line in the sand.
Frustrated, he says, by being told to move on.
And when you have this one hardcore line in the sand that everybody had been talking about forever, and then they're trying to gaslight you on that.
And in another development, Ghislaine Maxwell is renewing her request to the U.S. Supreme Court to overturn her conviction. And that's on conspiracy and sex trafficking of minors for aiding Jeffrey Epstein. Her legal team argues that she should not have been prosecuted based on terms of a deal that Epstein had made in a plea agreement a long time ago. The Justice Department, for its part, has urged the High Court not to consider this case. And, of course, this all comes after Maxwell spent 2 days in meetings answering questions with the Department of Justice's #2 official. Savannah?
All right, Kelly, thank you so much.
New details are emerging this morning about a married couple killed while hiking at an Arkansas state park with their 2 young daughters. Overnight, authorities released a sketch of a possible person of interest in the case. NBC News national correspondent Aaron Gilchrist joins us now from Devil's Den State Park with the latest. Aaron, good morning.
Hey, Joe, good morning. Kristen and Clinton Brink had only been here in Arkansas for about 3 weeks. They were out for this family hike over the weekend with their young daughters when they were attacked on the trail where they died. We know now there is a multi-agency search underway for the man that police believe is responsible for this just gruesome crime. Overnight, Arkansas State Police releasing a composite sketch of a man seen at the park. They want to question him about the murders of 43-year-old Clinton Brink and his 41-year-old wife, Kristen.
Possible stabbing, Devil's Den State Park.
The couple's 2 daughters, ages 7 and 9, unharmed, running for help after the attack.
2 children are there. They advised that their parents were assaulted. One was possibly stabbed. The parents are missing.
This is the chilling moment police found the bodies.
So we found the victims down here. I've got two bodies down here.
The Brinks were on a family hike Saturday afternoon in Devil's Den State Park, a sprawling 2,500 acres of rugged terrain, thick vegetation, and no cell phone service. The couple brutally attacked in broad daylight in front of their young children. Other hikers in the area now on high alert.
They're saying it's a random act, but, I mean, it definitely makes you know that you never know. Any day, the craziest thing could happen out of nowhere, especially in Arkansas.
Do you feel less safe here in the park knowing what happened here over the weekend?
I do. We just stayed in the car with the doors locked.
Family members are devastated, calling the pair a loving couple and devoted parents, and adding, Clinton and Kristen died heroes protecting their little girls, and they deserve justice. The state's governor, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, writing in part on X, law enforcement will not rest until the perpetrator is brought to justice. A community on edge.
Pray for all of us. And if you live in the area, stay safe. Lock your doors.
As authorities search for a dangerous suspect and answers. Now, all of the trails here at Devil's Den State Park are closed until further notice as the investigation continues here. Law enforcement presence, park rangers, they've stepped up their presence at parks all around Arkansas as a result of what happened here over the weekend. We also know that authorities are asking anybody who may have been in the park to check their cell phones. They want to see if anybody captured a photo or video of the person of interest they have in this case. They're also encouraging people, Joe, to check their home security cameras, folks who live in towns near the park here, and to check any game cameras that they may have set up in this area as well. Joe?
All right. Aaron, thank you so much.
Well, now this morning, we've got to look at the challenge of hiring and training more air traffic controllers amid record-breaking passenger levels. The washout rate for new controllers is high, with some new hires even describing a frat house hazing environment. NBC News senior correspondent Tom Costello covers aviation for us and has more.
Yeah, this is a very tough job. It may be similar in some ways to elite military units to try to weed out people who are not ready for that demanding job up there. Now, the union says this allegation of a college hazing environment, that's not reflective or representative of what most on-the-job training is like. But still, with 3,000 controllers short right now, the question is whether the culture at times can be counterproductive.
797 SoCal, radar contact, maintain 1-2000, 2 pounds run on. Maintain 12,250 knots, United 797.
From the tower to the radar center, the job requires laser focus every minute of the day.
Stop, Southwest 2937, stop.
Becoming a certified air traffic controller takes years, and some trainees say at times it can feel like college hazing.
There was a lot of beratement. There was a lot of, just, what are you doing? But with expletives thrown in. Why would you do that? I expect better of you.
Ryan Higgins got through the academy, but says his on-the-job training was delayed by a year during the pandemic. When he was finally able to start working with a supervisor, he accidentally deleted a passenger plane's live radar data.
Which meant now it's just a untracked radar blip, essentially. And the next sector was like, where is that plane?
Already struggling on low pay with a wife and new baby, the stress was too much. He resigned. He's hardly alone. Every new controller starts here, 4 months at the FAA Academy in Oklahoma City. The academy is not easy. 35% of the students here quit, fail, or wash out. Another 20% wash out once they're on the job. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy heard it firsthand when he visited.
One down, you're out. A little bit of pressure.
I think it would definitely be nice to have some sort of outside practice.
On-the-job training in towers and radar centers takes years. Now, a new Washington Post analysis finds the success rate can vary widely. Only 46% of trainees made it through the New York Center, 55% through Oakland, while 79% of trainees made it through the Miami Center, 85% through Denver. The FAA tells NBC News successfully completing the training to become an air traffic controller is not easy, and it shouldn't be. The FAA will maintain high standards regardless of the failure rate. The stakes are too high. While the FAA is trying to hire more controllers faster, many already on the job are working mandatory overtime, 10-hour days, 6-day weeks. Dana Broach is a retired FAA psychologist.
It is demanding. It is hard. And it gets harder as you get older to do that kind of shift work. I think that certainly exacerbates the staffing situation.
This is coming as the NTSB is about to begin 3 days of hearings here in Washington into the mid-air crash here at Reagan Airport in January involving that Army Black Hawk helicopter and an inbound American Airlines regional jet. 67 people died, and as you may recall, one controller in that tower that night was doing the job of two, handling both helicopters and planes. Back to you.
All right, Tom, thank you so much. Well, for more on this, let's bring in NBC News aviation analyst Jeff Guzzetti. Good morning, Jeff. Thank you so much for joining us. So we heard there, Tom just read this FAA statement saying it shouldn't be easy to become an air traffic controller because of just how high these stakes are. I think, though, even with that as a fact, it might be surprising for some to hear that the training process by some is being compared to college hazing. Do you believe this is the way that it has to be?
Good morning. No, this isn't the way it has to be. And I think the FAA and the Department of Transportation recognize that. That's why they initiated this effort to supercharge the air traffic control hiring. And they're trying to hit it from all aspects, to increase the pay of new controllers, to having additional simulators where new trainees can train, to upping the number of instructors at the FAA Academy. So they're trying to get at it at many different angles, and hopefully they'll be successful.
So knowing we have this nationwide shortage of about 3,000 controllers, how can the FAA quickly fill those roles without jeopardizing the safety of passengers because of the demands and the pressures of the job?
Well, that's the challenge right there. And I think they can do it, but it's going to be challenging. So they need to recruit more trainees, get them in the door, and offer them incentive bonuses to do that. And as you heard in Tom Costello's piece, there's already a 30% washout rate at the FAA Academy for that 4-month program. They need to look at that and streamline how they train controllers. And then once they get out, the majority of their training is at an actual facility where they're observing people. And they need to get more simulators. They need to get more trainees in there. So they're trying to get at it both financially, logistically, and through changing and modifying and upgrading their training processes.
The other thing we heard from Tom is, gosh, once you get through the years of training, then you're signing up for what could be 10-hour days, 6 days a week, mandatory overtime, which almost just sounds like this whole structure needs to be completely overhauled. At what point do you think more major changes are going to have to happen in order for this to be sustainable?
I don't think that major change is needed. You know, there's been talk about privatizing the air traffic control system. I don't think that's the answer. I think the FAA having federal control over it is the way to go. And the overtime is there because of the shortage. So they need to solve the shortage problem, and they're trying to do it any little way they can. But I think the structure is fundamentally sound.
All right, Jeff, thank you very much for joining us. Interesting conversation. Much more to come here on Morning News Now. Later this hour, Coach Prime opens up about his health, what Deion Sanders is telling the world about his recent battle with cancer as he navigates a new chapter in his life that's ahead.
Up first, concerns over famine continue to grow in Gaza. The latest from the Middle East as humanitarian aid slowly begins to arrive. We're back with the latest out of Gaza, where the death toll since the Israel-Hamas war began today surpassed 60,000 people. That's according to the Palestinian Authority's Ministry of Health. Israel did pause fighting in areas of the enclave earlier this week amid mounting international outrage over the death toll from starvation. New aid began flowing into Gaza yesterday through airdrops and truck convoys, but aid groups warn it is not enough. NBC News international correspondent Matt Bradley joins us now from Tel Aviv with the latest. Matt, good morning.
Hey, yeah, so we're seeing new aid being dropped into the Gaza Strip the third day in a row. Now, whether or not we're going to continue to see this, we haven't heard from the Israelis. This is something that is more of a salve at this point on the gaping wound that is the humanitarian crisis of the Gaza Strip, one that is still getting worse, especially with regard to malnutrition, even though the Israelis are letting in aid. We're still seeing more and more people being killed. And one very major but grim and symbolic milestone today, in just the past couple of hours, Palestinian authorities in the Gaza Strip have said more than 60,000 people have been killed ever since those October 7th, 2023 attacks. So this is a death toll that has not been arrested by the introduction of aid into the Gaza Strip. Aid agencies say this is not nearly enough, and they say that the airdropping isn't doing enough either. Here's our report. Today, the world's leading hunger watchdog group saying the worst-case scenario of famine is unfolding in the Gaza Strip. That new alert comes on the third day that Israel has paused fighting in parts of Gaza, letting in hundreds of trucks full of aid, and allowing other countries to airdrop dozens of aid pallets. When it lands, it's met by a scrum of desperate people trying to feed their families. I came only for my son, said this man. The aid came from the sky and I had to run after it. I've never had to do this, never in my life. Israel's prime minister saying earlier this week,
there is no policy of starvation in Gaza, and there is no starvation in Gaza.
Asked if he agreed yesterday, President Trump breaking publicly with his closest Middle East ally.
Based on television, I would say not particularly, because those children look very hungry.
Later, Trump weighing in again.
That's real starvation stuff. I see it, and you can't fake that.
He said the U.S. would be taking an even more direct role.
We're going to set up food centers, and we're going to do it in conjunction with some very good people.
Israeli human rights groups also raising alarms. For the first time, two prominent organizations joined international human rights groups in designating Israel's actions in Gaza a genocide.
We have witnessed unprecedented levels of civilian killings, of deliberate starvation.
Despite the new aid, Gazans continue to starve. Not so long ago, Hoda Abu al-Najah was a happy and healthy child, but she's now bedridden. Because of malnutrition, she said, I can no longer play or run. And guys, according to what we're hearing from the White House, from other Washington sources, our team in Washington, we will hear more details about what the president said about deepening American involvement in providing aid to the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. But as of now, it's still unclear whether the president is referring to American-backed aid operations that are already going on in the Gaza Strip, or whether he's talking about something new.
All right, Matt, thank you so much. For more on this, let's bring in Elise Labott. She's an Edward R. Murrow Press Fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations and author of Cosmopolitics on Substack. Elise, good to have you with us. Thanks for joining us. So what do you make of President Trump's abrupt change in messaging when it comes to aid in Gaza? I mean, on Sunday, he said Gaza was, quote, not a U.S. problem. Then a day later, talks about making sure the people of Gaza get food and setting up distribution centers. Any idea what changed his mind?
I mean, it's pretty much the pictures. You know, I think over time and even during his first term, when President Trump obviously watches a lot of television, as we know, and when he sees these pictures from NBC, from other news organizations, I think that's when his kind of humanitarian streak comes out. I don't think necessarily he feels any differently about the war or who's responsible. Ultimately for, the situation on the ground there. But in terms of the hunger, in terms of getting more aid in, I think this is where he, feels emotional and, sees those pictures and says, we have to help these children.
Do you think that these comments are starting to show a real split in U.S.-Israeli relations when it comes to Gaza, or no, given what you just mentioned about sort of his feelings about the war and who's responsible remaining the same?
Well, I mean, President Trump goes up and down, right? At first, he, was very supportive of Israel in the beginning. And then, over time, he wanted to get the ceasefire deal done. He worked with Prime Minister Netanyahu on Iran, and they seemed more aligned. President Trump wants this war over. He feels that it interrupts what he wants to do, both commercially in the Middle East, in other areas, focus on Asia, focus on the war in Ukraine. And so he really wants the war done. And, this ceasefire deal is dragging on. I don't think necessarily there'll be a split on Hamas and the ceasefire deal, but I think there will be additional pressure on Prime Minister Netanyahu to let that food in. I mean, you heard Prime Minister Netanyahu just now saying, oh, there's no starvation in Gaza. And anybody with eyes, including President Trump, can see that there's a real problem there. And so I think there's going to be more pressure on President Trump from President Trump on Prime Minister Netanyahu to let that aid in, to have those tactical pauses, which any, country that's engaged in conflict would face pressure from the U.S. at this point. I don't think there's a split on the war because you've seen President Trump is very frustrated with Hamas and the ceasefire deal. But on the aid, certainly, I think we're going to see more pressure.
This international course of outrage is probably the loudest we've heard in 2 years. I mean, real quick, do you think that could change what Israel is doing in the enclave?
I don't. We saw in May that there was a lot of pressure after the ceasefire deal broke down, and then Israel cut off aid for a significant amount of time. You heard a lot of pressure from the international community. That's when they came out with the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which is very controversial. So I don't think Israel, in terms of the war, is listening to any other country in terms of fighting, in terms of going after Hamas. Even voices in Israel that are against the war, they're not listening to Prime Minister Netanyahu and his coalition. So I don't think it'll affect the war in any way. I do think what it'll do is have to organize more aid mechanisms to get that food to the people that need it.
Elise Labott, appreciate your time and your expertise this morning. Thank you so much.
We are following developing news now out of northern China. This morning, rescue efforts are underway after the Beijing region got almost a year's worth of rain in just a matter of days.
NBC News international correspondent Claudio Labonga is in Rome with that and other world news in 60 seconds. Claudio, good morning.
Good morning, guys. That's right. Authorities in China say now at least 38 people have been killed by heavy rain and flooding in Beijing and the Hebei neighboring province. Tens of thousands of people were also evacuated in the capital. More than 100 villages were left without power, and authorities warned people to stay away from rivers as their level rose and more heavy rain is forecast. Let's go now to Turks and Caicos Islands, where 3 young men were killed and 10 others were injured in what authorities say is the British territory's first mass shooting in recent history. The shooting took place in a popular night spot on Sunday. No arrests have been made, but the island's prime minister blamed the violence on the immigrant Haitian community. And let's end this tour of the world in Russia, where on Monday the state-owned flagship airline Aeroflot canceled more than 100 flights after a cyber attack caused massive outage to the company's computer system. 2 hacker groups, one from Ukraine and one from Belarus, claim responsibility for what is considered the most disruptive cyber attack since the start of the war in Ukraine. Back to you guys.
All right, Claudio, thank you so much. Coming up, we're taking a closer look at the impacts of climate change.
Yeah, up next, we're going to break down new data highlighting the devastation that extreme changes in the climate is having globally. You're watching Morning News Now. We are back now with a closer look at what is making news in the world of politics this morning, starting with the latest developments in President Trump's $10 billion lawsuit against media mogul Rupert Murdoch.
For more on this, let's bring in NBC News senior national political reporter Sahil Kapoor. Sahil, good morning.
Good morning, guys. We start the day in politics with President Trump's lawyers asking a judge to require that Rupert Murdoch sit for a deposition within just 15 days of his $10 billion lawsuit over a Wall Street Journal article reporting on a bawdy birthday letter once sent by Trump to the notorious sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. The tactic? They're claiming that Murdoch is so old at 94 that he would be, quote, unavailable for in-person testimony at trial, according to the lawyers. The media mogul opposes that request for a speedy deposition, the filing says. It's all part of a strategy where President Trump has repeatedly used lawsuits to try and punish unfavorable media coverage of him, or for that matter, favorable coverage of a rival. And here in Washington, some key Republicans in Congress are already regretting a tax hike on gamblers that they inserted into President Trump's so-called Big Beautiful Bill, with several lawmakers who voted for the legislation now calling for repealing it. That includes the House's top tax writer, Congressman Jason Smith, who told me this tax hike is a mistake by the Senate and that it needs to be undone. Senator Ted Cruz said it's unfair and that most Republicans didn't even know this was in the bill when they voted to pass it. The policy has sparked an outcry from gamblers, with one professional sports bettor calling it potentially catastrophic for the industry. It would reduce the tax deduction on wagering losses from 100% to 90% starting in 2026. Long story short, gamblers could be stuck with a tax bill even if they have zero net winnings in a year. And speaking of, Vice President J.D. Vance swung by a steel factory in Canton, Ohio on Monday to tout the president's agenda, including this multi-trillion-dollar mega bill, which is now a law and remains unpopular with voters. He visited the competitive district of Democratic Congresswoman Emilia Sykes to tout the provisions the White House wants to focus on, including the tax breaks for tips and overtime pay. He accused the opposition party of trying to tear down Donald J. Trump. Sykes, for her part, told NBC News that the vice president lied and that she wasn't invited to that event because she would have told the truth. Earlier, Vance visited the competitive district of Pennsylvania Republican Rob Bresnahan to support him. It's a glimpse of how the White House plans to use Vance ahead of the midterms to sell the president's agenda, to campaign for Republican candidates, and to serve as an attack dog. And that is where we start today in politics. Back to you, Joe.
All right. Thank you so much, Sahil. Appreciate it. The U.S. continues to feel the most devastating blows from climate change. Already this year, we've topped $100 billion in damages, accounting for 70% of weather-related destruction globally. New data from Munich Re, the world's largest reinsurance company, shows that more than half of that damage happened during the L.A. wildfires back in January. NBC News meteorologist Chase Kane explains.
It wasn't just the LA wildfires, and it's not just this year. This new analysis from one of the world's biggest reinsurance companies shows that the United States continues to face more costly disasters than any other country on the planet. And that's despite the Trump administration deciding earlier this year to stop releasing data like this. But scientists and insurance companies say that doesn't change the truth, that climate change is making disasters like this more extreme and more common.
We have been observing that trend now for many decades. The losses are on the rise because often properties are in harm's way, but also climate change increases the likelihood of these types of extreme weather events going forward.
The LA wildfires topped the list, leaving $53 billion in damage, $13 billion of that uninsured, meaning local governments and homeowners who struggled to get fire insurance continue to face difficult financial choices.
I called every company that I've heard of, and everyone said, no, you're in the fire zone. You don't qualify for insurance through us. I don't know how long I'm going to be out of my home for.
And that's true even far from the threat of wildfires or hurricanes. In the Midwest, March, April, and May brought 4 waves of tornadoes, hail, and flooding, causing a combined $19 billion in damage. And this report doesn't even count July's deadly flooding in Texas. Even before that, 2025 was already shaping up to be one of the most destructive years in U.S. history as more Americans face soaring home insurance costs. Munich Re's chief climate scientist says that's in part because we're only beginning to see the full impact and cost of climate change.
I very often have the feeling that people are not really familiar with the personal risk situation. So there's a misperception of risks. And this is something we just need to capture and understand, that these kinds of climate risks are on the rise, even if you don't see the risk.
Insurance experts say one of the best ways to bring down the cost of insurance for Americans may not be popular, because it would mean that we would have to stop building in risky areas and stop rebuilding in risky areas after a disaster. And so many of us are attached to our homes and our communities, so there's not an easy path forward. In Pacific Palisades, California, I'm meteorologist Chase Kane.
All right, Chase, thank you. Coming up, Pro Football Hall of Famer Deion Sanders is opening up about his recent battle with cancer.
When we come back, we'll tell you what he told reporters about his health and his message to fans. Details ahead. We're back with economic headlines and begin with Spirit Airlines' latest efforts to cut costs.
CNBC's Silvana Henao joins us with that and more for your Money Minute. Silvana, good morning.
Hey, Savannah. Hey, Joe. Good morning. So, yes, Spirit Airlines will furlough about 270 pilots and demote another 140 as the struggling discount airline scales down its workforce while preparing to cut its flight schedule. So the furloughs, they go into effect in November and the demotions October. Spirit emerged from bankruptcy in March, and it's trying to overhaul its business to move away from its no-frills image, rebranding as a premium airline. Samsung's chairman is heading to Washington a day after unveiling a more than $16 billion deal to supply semiconductor chips to Tesla. And this comes as Samsung has struggled to win major customers for its new factory in Texas, due in part to low production of its cutting-edge chips. Analysts say while the deal is positive for the companies, we likely won't see the Samsung chips in Tesla cars for at least a year or two. And Microsoft is testing a new experimental Copilot mode inside the Edge web browser. It allows Copilot to search across all your open tabs and handle tasks such as booking a restaurant. It also brings the Copilot chatbot to your new tab page and supports voice navigation to locate information or compare products. If you opt in, Microsoft will also let Copilot access your browser history and credentials so it can book reservations on your behalf, guys.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I just doing it all.
It does it all.
Thank you so much. Well, now to some shocking news in the sports world. Deion Sanders opened up for the first time yesterday about his recent health battle. The Colorado football coach announced he was treated for bladder cancer and that he had surgery to remove it. Now his doctor is saying he is cured. NBC News correspondent Kaylee Hartung has all the details.
Hey there, Coach Prime has spent decades showing us all how tough he is, but very few people have known the depths of the fight he's been in for the past few months. Now, just ahead of the University of Colorado's fall training camp getting underway, the Pro Football Hall of Famer is sharing very personal details about life during and after bladder cancer.
Deion Sanders is navigating a new chapter of life, revealing he's battled and beaten cancer.
It's been a tremendous journey. It's been tough.
The Colorado football coach announcing he was diagnosed with an aggressive form of bladder cancer in April, and less than a month later had surgery to remove it.
The results from the surgery are that he is cured from the cancer.
Bladder cancer is the fourth most common cancer in men. And though blood in the urine is the most common symptom, Sanders' tumor was discovered during a routine CT scan.
No symptoms, no nothing, healthy. Going in there to look at something else.
While Sanders kept his cancer battle private until now, he'd been notably absent from Colorado football activities, sparking questions about his health. Coach Prime saying he even hid his diagnosis from his sons, Shador and Shiloh, as they prepared for the NFL draft.
I wanted them to focus on making the team and not focused on dad.
Sanders now sharing this emotional video filmed in May as he processed the seriousness of his condition.
I had to make a will.
Nearly 58 years old, the Pro Football Hall of Famer and two-time Super Bowl champion says he's had 14 surgeries in the past 4 years.
I had more surgeries out of the game than I did in the game.
Several procedures related to blood clots, which Sanders discussed on Today last year.
It was life-threatening, then it was leg-threatening, then it was foot-threatening, then I had 2 toes amputated.
Following Monday's announcement, Sanders sharing this video, showing him fishing after his bladder removal surgery, his catheter still attached.
It just looked bad, and I'm fishing with 2 bags.
Now, Coach Prime says he's ready to return to the sidelines for his 3rd season leading the Buffaloes. And sending this message, hoping his off-the-field fight can help others.
Get checked out, because it could have been a whole nother gathering if I had.
Now, Coach Prime's doctor says his outlook is very good. They will monitor him with routine surveillance scans. But Prime said he's still building back after losing as many as 25 pounds during this ordeal. And there is a lifestyle change he continues to face. He warned very candidly, you'll see a porta potty on the sidelines of those Colorado games. And even if that brought a laugh to the room, his message was as serious as ever. Get checked out. Back to you.
All right, Kaylee, thank you.
All right, coming up, an Indiana couple is looking to bring back what some consider to be a lost art.
When we come back, I'll look at their push to expand cursive writing to students in their community. Stay with us. We are going to end this hour with a renewed attempt to revive a dying art.
That was not an art when I was a kid. Reporter Leanne Trotter from NBC Chicago spoke with one couple that is teaching cursive to young people for free.
That letter J was tricky.
Twice a week, Terrell Whittington and his wife, Chelsea, come here to the YWCA Northwest Indiana to teach young students cursive writing.
There's this whole new generation of young people who have absolutely no idea what cursive is. And so he said, why don't we reintroduce that and see what we can do in our community.
All right, I like that. I like that enthusiasm, guys.
A few months ago, they decided to create a curriculum after discussing how many school districts are no longer teaching cursive writing. The YWCA was one of the first organizations that agreed to sponsor Cursive Academy.
I'm so happy about it and pleased because our kids need to be exposed to everything. We do not need to dummy down. We got to level up. So that cursive writing is leveling up.
I knew a little bit, I could read it a little bit, but this really actually taught me how to do cursive. I would say the first day it was a little bit hard learning it, but once you get it, I feel like you kind of just got it, you know.
11-year-old Sinila Shields is already thinking about the long-term implications.
I want to be a publisher or author when I grow up, so I want to write my signature down so they can know it's me.
This course is free for these students because the Y is sponsoring classes for its members.
It's just wonderful to see how my husband came up with an idea and our community has rallied around us to get it done.
Yes, good job, baby, good job.
The Whittingtons are hoping more corporations and other organizations in Northwest Indiana and Chicago follow suit to help make a difference for families that need financial assistance.
Okay, how cool is that? Our thanks to Leanne Trotter for that report. We have one more thing to mention this hour. I want to take the opportunity to shout out Joe.
I'm old.
Wishing a very happy
Another
birthday
year.
today. It's Joe's birthday. The team loves you. Our viewers love you. I love you. Happy birthday.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm here at work. Where else would I want to be on my big day? That'll do it for this hour of morning news now.
Stay with us. The news continues right now.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.